If Humiliation had a sound, it would be like crystal shattering, delicate, beautiful, and absolutely final. The ballroom at Morel House felt like an aquarium, filled with soft lighting and judging eyes. The chandeliers hung like frozen rain. Everywhere Nora looked, she saw bronze hairpins, tuxedo lapels, and heard a hushed murmur of "darling." She had built this party from the ground up, managing budget spreadsheets, making countless vendor calls, and carrying the spiral-bound run of show like armor in her clutch. She believed in clean lines and anticipating every possible problem. She believed in taking the sting out of chaos by being meticulously prepared. What she hadn't prepared for was Rhea Collins. On stage, Rhea tapped the microphone with a perfectly manicured nail, her smile bright enough to light up the entire room. "A toast," she sang out, "to my dearest friend Nora Hale, the genius behind tonight's perfection, and to the price of perfection." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Nora felt the waves of laughter, and then their crushing weight. Rhea snapped her fingers. The LED wall dimmed, and the carefully curated highlight reel that Nora had prepared, showing Elder Harbor through the decades, tourists enjoying the inn's porch, glitched out, became a pixelated mess, and then reconfigured itself into a montage that Nora didn't even recognize. A cheap pop song started playing. Nora's face filled the screen. A shot of her mid-blink, hair pulled up in a messy bun with a pencil, sitting cross-legged on a milk crate during load-in, a paper coffee cup between her knees. Then fake stylized text bubbles popped up next to her head. "I'm not like the women who need help. Small towns are training wheels." Rhea would die without a ring light. The laughter was sharp, almost predatory. Someone said, "savage," as if it were a compliment. "These are jokes," Rhea said. But the microphone didn't pick up the first word. These blurred into these people, into these truths. The editing was precise, almost surgical. A clear wink of intent. "We tease the ones we love." On screen, another clip. Nora in college holding up a thrift store dress in front of her dorm mirror, mouthing the words, "Fake it till you make it." Her cheeks flushed with heat. That video was supposed to be lost on a dead laptop. She felt the room lean in, felt the polite interest of strangers transform into something cruel and competitive. She looked for her mother. Vivian stood near the bar in a navy dress with simple lines, her thumbs resting on her clutch. She stood with the posture of a nurse, a calm that had witnessed terrible things and refused to break. When Vivian met Nora's eyes, she raised one eyebrow, their silent code for breathe. Rhea lifted her flute. "To Nora Hale, for making us look better than we are." The laughter grew louder. Someone clapped too enthusiastically. Glasses clinked and chimed. Nora's throat felt like she had swallowed aspirin. She managed a smile that felt like it was cut from foil, and into that smile she poured everything she had left. Her professionalism, her father's advice about weathering storms, her mother's habit of silently counting to 8 before she spoke. "One more," Rhea trilled. The LED wall flashed a final cruel image. A freeze frame of the Hale Harbor and porch string lights creating a halo around a summer wedding. And a red stamp that read "foreclosed"? The question mark pulsed like a heartbeat. Nora didn't remember moving, but suddenly she was at the AV booth, her palm flat on the table, her voice low. "Kill the feed." The technician blinked at her. "That's the mayor's reel." "It's a liability," Nora said. "We're done here." He hesitated for a moment. Nora held his gaze until his hand finally found the switch. The screen went black. The room exhaled. By then, Rhea had already slipped into a practiced pout. "God, can't anyone take a joke?" she asked the crowd, but she was really asking Nora. Nora thought back to college, to nights when they shared eyeliner and secrets on floors sticky with spilled vodka. To the pact they made to text each other before posting anything that could be potentially damaging. She didn't go back on stage. She went outside, where the cold air shocked her lungs and the surf filed its endless complaint against the rocks. She counted to 8. Then she started again. Behind her, the ballroom was already returning to its usual expensive party vibe. The string quartet playing on autopilot, cocktails sweating on silver trays. Near the valet stand, Eli leaned against a column, his tux slightly unbuttoned, wearing a smile that had always gotten him further than it should have. "Hey," he said, his tone soft. Hey, you okay?" "I'm great," Nora said. "I'm a meme now." "Memes are currency," Eli said, trying to lighten the mood. His attempt fell flat between them, noisy and useless. He became serious. "I'll talk to her." "You won't," Nora said, not unkindly. "And it won't even matter." Eli ran a hand through his hair. "You handled that well in there. Everyone saw it. The mayor will love you even more for being so unflappable." The mayor? Lila Morell's smile was a weaponized form of calm. She had commissioned this gala as a heritage fundraiser, while quietly pushing a redevelopment plan that would turn the harbor into condos shaped like vape pens. Nora had swallowed her skepticism because her father always said, "Contracts feed us while opinions starve us." "Go back in there," Eli said. "Claim your victory. Don't let Rhea steal your exit too." Nora didn't go back in. She went home. The call came at 1:17 a.m. The number was unknown. The voice was flat and emotionless. "Fire at Hale Harbor Inn. Dispatch already on the way." Nora drove through red lights that blinked like accusations. The inn was located 6 blocks from the water on Cedar, a 3-story building with white clapboard siding and black shutters, porches wide enough to collect both weather and gossip. She'd learned to walk on those porches. She'd learned to spell under that roof, learned to fold napkins into perfect shapes, and learned the weight of the keys. Now smoke was writing black cursive against the night sky. The east wing was spitting fire from a second-floor window, the orange flames licking out like a tongue. Sirens wailed in the air. Neighbors stood at their hedges in sweaters and old t-shirts, hugging themselves for warmth or comfort. Graham was already there, arguing with a firefighter as if arguments could somehow reverse the laws of physics. He was wearing his canvas work coat, and his hair was mussed as if the wind had been trying to pull him apart. "My rooms," he said when he saw Nora, as if the rooms were his children. "Did your mother call you?" "The dispatcher," Nora said, grabbing his forearm. "Dad, where's Mom?" "Inside," he said, and then, seeing the look on her face, quickly corrected himself. No, she wanted to get the quilts. She tried to go in for the quilts. Reyes dragged her back. "She's over there." Vivian was sitting on the curb, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her lips colorless. Her hands were trembling with an anger so intense it had become still. Detective Sloan Reyes, basically the only officer in town who spoke to people like they were human beings, was squatting nearby, talking to her in a low voice. Nora knelt down beside her. "Mom, the Thornton quilt," Vivian said, her voice a whisper built from ruined sleep. "It's older than me." "We'll save what we can," Sloan said. "You can't breathe smoke and argue about heirlooms at the same time, Miss Hale." "I can't breathe because people don't know the difference," Vivian said, and Nora recognized that voice, her nurse voice, the one Vivian reserved for doctors who wouldn't listen. A quilt is not just fabric. A home is not just a building. A town is not just a brand. Sloan looked at Nora with a brief flicker of sympathy, then stood up. "We need tape," she called out, and someone handed her a roll. She cordoned off the steps. Eli arrived, out of breath, his tie gone, and his hair completely disheveled. "How?" he asked, which really meant, "How do I fix this?" "Electrical? Kitchen?" "The kitchen's clean," Graham said, clearly insulted. "This is new." Sloane's partner approached, carrying a healthy dose of cynicism. "We'll know more when the fire's out. Could be a space heater in the staff room, a charger left in a socket. Or a goddamn miracle," Graham said, and then said nothing because that wasn't really the word he meant. By dawn, the fire had become a sulk of smoke and damp char. The east wing looked like a bitten apple. Nora's throat was raw. The sun came up, both relentless and guilty. "Go home," Sloan told them. "We'll call you when it's safe to look." They didn't go home. Hales were notoriously bad at obeying orders to rest. They stood across the street at the diner, drank burnt coffee, and tried to piece together the words into a question that could actually hold an answer. At 9:42 a.m., Eli's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and stood up so quickly his chair screeched against the floor. What? What? Graham echoed, almost like a dare. Eli swallowed hard. It's my escrow accounts. Frozen. Bank maintenance? Nora tried, but the words felt like paper in her mouth. Every account, Eli said. And the firm's email locked. I can't even log into the MLS. It's like, I don't exist. Nora's phone lit up with a different kind of emergency. A notification from the insurance portal for the inn, status updated. Claim flagged for preliminary denial pending investigation. She tapped the screen and then tapped again. A new message. Policy lapse noted due to missed payment. That's wrong, Nora said. I use autopay. Graham pinched the bridge of his nose. We don't miss payments. Vivian, who treated paperwork like a sacred duty, looked up from her coffee. I balanced the accounts on Thursday. We have the receipts. Nora pulled up the bank statements. The last 3 withdrawals to Marion Mutual weren't there. In their place were 3 identical payments to Marion Mural Company, a company she'd never even heard of. A swap of 2 letters, easily overlooked in a quick scan, perfectly designed to go unnoticed until a crisis. Mason Ward texted her then, uninvited and exactly on time. You seeing outages? Elder Harbor network's a mess. Call me. She hadn't spoken to Mason in months. He'd fixed a ransomware scare for the town museum for a fee so small Nora had teased him about hating money. He just shrugged and said, I like sleeping. She called him. We're on fire, she said, meaning everything. Yeah, he said. I'm seeing smoke from Bayview. You're in. I'm sorry. The click of keys. Also, someone rerouted payments on at least 3 local businesses using ghost vendors. DNS poisoning last week. Quiet. Surgical. Nora closed her eyes. Why us? Why anybody pressure property politics? The inn is leverage. He paused for a moment. And last night's party gave someone an alibi. Ria's laughter echoed in Nora's head like a broken record. To Nora Hale for making us look better than we are. Can you fix it? Nora asked. I can follow the threads, he said. But I can't unburn wood. She hung up and met her mother's eyes. Vivian nodded once. That nod meant, we will not be stupid. We will not be small. We will not be kind to people who would rather see us broken than breathing. At noon they crossed the police tape with Sloane's escort. The air inside the east wing was a sour steam of soaked ash. The office door was blistered, but it opened. Vivian made a beeline for the file cabinet like a homing pigeon. Graham stood at the window, his hands braced on the frame. Nora went to the computer. The tower's power supply had melted into a glossy tear. But the external backup drive, small, silver, and pebble-shaped, lay kicked against the desk leg. She crouched down and cupped it in both hands as if it might start shivering. Please, she told it, because prayer in a crisis is really just politeness toward luck. Ms. Hale. Sloane called from the hall. Did you own a silver lighter? No, Nora said. Your father? Sloane asked. Graham shook his head. Sloane held up a bagged, soot-smudged lighter with an etched crest on it. It looked expensive and ugly. We found this under the stairwell where the fire spread the fastest. Vivian tilted her head, her eyes narrowed. Morel, she said softly. Or someone who wants us to think so. The mayor doesn't smoke, Eli said. Mayors inhale worse things, Vivian said. Sloane's mouth twitched slightly. I'll log it. As they stepped back into the ruined hallway, her phone buzzed. A news alert with Rhea Collins' face behind bright text. Harbor heiress meltdown? Inside the party that went nuclear. The thumbnail was a picture of Nora, mid-turn, caught in that split second between bracing herself and breaking down. Nora imagined smashing the phone against the wall, and then imagined the wall laughing at her. They're going to feast on this, she said. They always feast, Vivian answered. We're going to set the table. Graham turned away from the window. Mason Ward, he said, as if remembering a tool in a drawer. Call him. If they want a storm, we'll give them a map. Outside, the town had already adjusted its posture. The way people always do when the light changes. Curious, hungry, and speculative. The ocean kept breathing. The charm made its own weather. Nora stood in the doorway of what used to be the office and tucked the silver drive under her coat like a secret heartbeat. Rhea had humiliated her. The night had stripped them bare. But humiliation is really just a kind of fire, showy, hot, and eager to be fed. A smarter fire is patience. Nora inhaled the smell of ash and salt, counted to 8, and stepped into the day that would try its best to break her. By afternoon, the Hale inbox looked like the aftermath of a party where no one had bothered to clean up. Ash in the subject lines, footprints in the drafts. Nora sat at the kitchen table with the rescued silver drive and a pot of coffee that tasted burnt, her elbows braced on the table like pillars. Mason's voice came through her speaker, all consonants and calm. "Okay," he said. "First, copy the whole drive. Work only on the duplicate. If this thing is booby-trapped, we trip the copy, not the original." She did as he instructed. The progress bar inched forward like a tired snail. Vivian moved through the kitchen with the composed fury of a nurse on hour 14, assembling sandwiches that no one would eat and setting down glasses of water that people would forget to drink. Eli paced the length of the narrow hall, on his 5th call to a bank manager who had stopped saying sir. "Received," Mason said. "I'm in your logs. Someone redirected your autopays using a lookalike vendor and a poison DNS entry. English. They changed the phone book of the internet for your devices," he said. "When you thought you were calling Marion Mutual, your computer called Marion Mural, which is a ghost that sends your money to a different place. You wouldn't notice without checking the URL character by character." "How many payments?" "3. Enough to flag you as lapsed." A beat of silence. This wasn't sloppy. They spoofed two-factor messages too. The SMS replies in your log never left your device. Your phone thought it was talking to your insurer. It was talking to a mimic. Nora felt heat crawl up her neck. "Can we prove it? We can show routing tables and DNS caches. We can show typosquatted domains registered 2 months ago by a shell that links to another shell. But insurers love the word negligence. They'll say you should have known." Vivian paused at the sink. "I keep paper backups," she said. "Dates. Amounts. Bank statements." "Good," Mason said. "That won't fix the fire, but it undermines the lapse. Send me scans." A chime sounded. Nora's phone. Rhea Collins had posted. "I messed up. I'm sorry." The thumbnail was a picture of Rhea in dewy light, wearing a hoodie and soft mascara. Comments were already pouring in. "Don't watch it," Eli said instinctively, which really meant watch it now. Nora tapped the screen because you couldn't fight a leak with just a towel. Rhea's face filled the screen, bare as a confession booth. "Last night I tried to make a joke," she began, her voice catching in a theatrical display of sincerity. "I would never hurt Nora. We've been through everything together. College. Rent we couldn't afford. The time I sold my boots for protein powder." She laughed, then swallowed it back. "The edit wasn't mine. Someone hijacked the reel. I'm devastated." B-roll cutaways. College photos, a blatant montage of the inn on fire. Rhea blinked back tears. "Nora is strong. I'm asking you, please don't bully her. She doesn't deserve this." The comment waterfall had already formed. Queen of accountability, who leaked the DM though? Fire at the inn? Is this a PR pivot or a cry for help? Nora stopped the video when Rhea said "we" again. "She made it about her," she said, more tired than angry. "Apology is brand expansion," Eli muttered under his breath. Mason's keys clicked in the background. "Rhea didn't cut your reel," he said. "A remote process injected payloads into the LED system at Morel House last night. The vendor used a cloud service with open credentials someone posted on a freelancer forum. Not subtle but effective. So they humiliated me as a cover," Nora said. "Then burned our inn and stole our payments. Or humiliate to destabilize. The fire might be separate." He exhaled. "But the timing's choreography." Nora's laptop dinged again. Marion Mutual notice of pending denial. She opened it, feeling like someone had lodged a stone under her sternum. Policy lapsed as of 11:59 p.m. last night. A timestamp that felt like the punchline of a bad joke. At 4:37 p.m. Detective Sloane Reyes arrived, bringing with her a cool draft of competence, a folder under her arm and soot on her boots. "We found an accelerant trail," she said without any preface. "It's faint, as if someone tried to scrub it clean, but it's there. The lighter's high-end engraved crest, custom order. It will take time to tie it to a specific person without some help." Vivian's eyes sharpened. "The Morel crest?" Sloane didn't flinch. "Similar. But crests are like names in this town. Everyone borrows them." "The mayor was at the party," Nora said. "She has eyes at the bank, at the council, at the development office." Sloane slid a photo across the table. The lighter bag, the soot smudged on the metal like poorly applied eyeliner. "You'll see memes before you see subpoenas. So don't help them." She turned to Nora. "You need to log every notice you get. Screenshots, download headers, and keep the originals. If an insurer claims you miss payments, we show manipulation. Chain of custody matters." "Chain of custody," Nora echoed. "Got it." "Also," Sloane added almost gently, "don't read the comments." Nora lied and said she wouldn't. By twilight, Mason had mapped out a small graveyard of look-alike domains. Marion Mural. Com. Eldelhar Brb0R. Com Hailharboren. Co Noem. They all originated from a registrar in Nevada. Tumbleweed legalese hiding behind a privacy service. The payments were funneled into an account at a bank that catered to innovators. Anonymous on purpose. "Who profits?" Vivian asked. "When an inn burns and an insurance claim falters?" "Developers," Eli said. "Debt holders. People with a plan for the land." Nora watched her mother's jaw tighten. "And old feuds," Vivian murmured almost to herself. "What feud?" Eli asked, distracted, his eyes glued to his silent phone. Vivian wiped her hands on a towel. "We were not the only nurses in town," she said. "And Lila Morel was not always a mayor. Her mother and I disagreed. It left a stain." "About what?" Vivian looked at Nora. "About what a town owes." The kitchen light hummed. Outside, the harbor moved with its ancient animal patience. On the table, Nora's screen showed the cursor blinking inside a new folder she'd labeled with a nurse's neatness. "Custody, evidence, day 1. "Okay," she said, speaking to the metal and glass like she was casting a spell. "Ashen screenshots. We built from here." Vivian's journals lived in the linen closet on the third shelf, beneath the good towels that you weren't supposed to use unless grief or guests arrived. She had started keeping them when she was 19, a habit taught to her by a supervisor who believed that memory was a polite liar, and that ink would keep you honest. On the second morning after the fire, Vivian carried 3 volumes to the table the way she used to carry babies, cradled, careful. The covers were soft with time, the spines sturdy and competent. She didn't ask permission. She opened one to 1998. "Read this," she said to Nora, tapping the page with one clean nail. June 12. The Morel boy, Caden, admitted after a fall from the fishing pier. Lila insisted he'd been pushed. No witnesses. She screamed at staff. Called the hospital a thieves' den. I asked her to lower her voice. She said I was protecting my own because the Hale kids had been playing near the pier. Graham offered to pay for tests anyway. They took the money and told everyone we made them. Nora read the entry twice. The ink had a certain pressure to it, as if Vivian had written it through gritted teeth. "Next," Vivian said, opening another journal. August 4th. Lila started a petition to stop the inn from hosting late-night music on weekends. We offered to end at 10. She called me small-town ambitious. Like it was a disease. Graham says it's grief-curdled into politics. I say it's a ladder she will climb even if she has to use our backs. Eli slid into a chair, his hair wet from a shower that clearly hadn't woken him up. "You think the mayor has harbored a vendetta for 25 years and is burning buildings now? People don't need 25 years, Vivian said. They just need the right wind. Nora flipped forward. There. A clipping glued into the journal, a column about Layla Morel's first council run, and a note in Vivian's fine script. She will say it's about safety. It is about control. Another entry. She knows where every grant dollar goes. She knows who is tired of old porches. She will redevelop this town like a spreadsheet. Vivian closed the book. I kept these for me, she said. Now they are for us. Patterns are first aid. Nora scanned entries with her phone, the Axe-soothing capture label and file. Mason pinged her with a map of shell companies. Found this Harborward LLC. The extra R felt like the domain trick, connected to a venture fund that Jonah Pike advises. Guess who filed a preliminary request with the planning office last month to expedite permits for a mixed-use development on Cedar? He attached a PDF of a public notice that no one had bothered to read. Jonah Pike, Eli said, saying his name like a curse word. He came by the office last week. He offers cures that feel like a noose. Show me, Nora said. Eli looked guilty. He said he could float my escrow during temporary disruptions at a rate that would make me cry if I did the math. I told him no. He smiled like that was part of the process. Vivian poured coffee that had been sitting out just long enough to be resentful. Paper cuts, she said. One by one. Then you're bleeding to death. The doorbell rang. It was Sloane. She brought photocopies of an arson report draft, the lighter photo, and a note. Don't share this yet. Trust earned, not spent. She looked at the journals with an almost reverent envy. I wish every witness kept notes like a nurse, she said. I wish every cop read like a nurse, Vivian returned. Sloane smiled briefly. The lighter engraving, she said, isn't an exact match to the Morel crest. It's missing the twisted rope border. Could be a fake. Could be a gift. Could be a plant. Who buys a fake family crest? Eli asked. Someone who wants you to look in the wrong direction, Sloane said. They drove to the ruins together. Nora, Sloane, and Eli. Moving slowly past neighbors who waved the way people do when they're performing empathy for each other. The inn skeleton steamed in the cold. A sawhorse barricade guarded the front steps like a tired dog. Inside the office, the smell turned memory into a tangible thing that you could rub between your finger and thumb. Nora found the wall safe behind the framed map of Elder Harbor. The map had survived like a miracle, charred at the edges, the streets smudged but still legible. Graham had installed the safe the year Eli started charming locksmiths for fun. Nora felt for the hidden latch, pressed it, and the panel gave way. The safe door had blistered paint and released a stubborn hiss of damp air. Combination? Sloane asked. Nora smiled without humor. Dad used a date none of us would forget. She spun the dial to 0826, her parents' anniversary. The day her father claimed they stopped being lucky and chose to be. The lock clicked like a small sign of approval. Inside, cash in envelopes smelling faintly of smoke, a stack of old policy folders, and something incongruous, a microfilm canister, labeled in Vivian's tidy handwriting, Thornton/lot transfer/83 to 85. Beneath it, a folded sheet. An old survey map of the harbor lots, filled with hatching and numbers, and a red X on a strip of land behind the inn that Nora had always assumed was just scrub. What is that? Eli asked, peering over her shoulder. Receipts for a story, Nora said. Sloane's eyebrows rose. Microfilm, she said. Either someone wanted it gone, or someone forgot that the old world keeps its own backups. They brought the canister home like it was contraband. That afternoon, Mason showed up in person with a portable microfilm reader, the kind that museums loan out to schools. He set it up on the dining table between Vivian's journals and a vase of wilting carnations that someone had left on the front steps. A gesture of sympathy. Frames flickered to life on the screen. Property deeds typed on delicate onion skin paper. Signatures with elaborate loops that spoke of pride. The Thornton name appeared repeatedly, and then Morel. A property transfer from 1984 revealed dockside easement rights, and a clause that granted the right of first refusal for any adjacent properties. The document was witnessed by a young, ambitious attorney whose name was now engraved on the plaque outside the municipal building. "This," Mason said, tapping the clause with the cap of his pen, "is like a knife hidden inside a handshake." Vivian held her coffee mug with both hands, warming them. "Lila's mother," she said, her voice tinged with understanding, "wanted the harbor. And if the inn falters, this easement becomes active." Nora read aloud, her voice steadied despite the implication. "If the insurance company denies our claim and we default on our loans, this right of first refusal becomes a barrier that no one else can overcome." "Paper cuts," Vivian repeated, but without malice. "And one deep vein. Debt initially presents itself as a favor, until you examine its true intentions." Jonah Pike arrived at the Hale house, wearing an air of contrition like a perfectly tailored suit. He hadn't bothered to call ahead. He simply rang the bell and then checked his watch, as if time were at his command. His hairstyle was impeccably neat, and his smile seemed to know exactly how to charm the room. Eli opened the door and tried to fill the doorway, blocking his entrance. "We're not receiving visitors," he said firmly. "I'm not a visitor," Jonah replied, his voice carefully modulated to sound like a friendly neighbor offering help. "I'm a solution." Nora stepped up behind Eli, her spine straight and her hands empty. "You were there at the fire," she stated, recalling how she'd seen him at the edge of the crowd, his jaw tense. "I live here," Jonah said smoothly. "I care about Elder Harbor." "Which is precisely why your fund just filed to expedite the permits on Cedar," Nora countered. "Operating through a shell company." Something flickered behind Jonah's eyes, a brief flash of annoyance. It lasted for only a blink. "Development is not a sin," he declared, taking a step inside without being invited. "It's a way to break free from stagnation. But that's not the reason I'm here." He placed a folder on the hall table as if it were a precious gift, terms for bridge financing with interest rates that felt predatory, and a grace period that was barely long enough to take a breath. "You're experiencing a temporary cash flow problem," he explained. "An insurance snag. An arson investigation. Banks tend to get nervous when there's smoke. But I'm not nervous. I can support the inn's operations, settle any overdue payments, and release your brother's escrow account through a partnership with a private investment firm. You can keep your staff paid and your contractors satisfied. In return, I receive a minority stake in the inn, secured against future earnings." "What's the interest rate?" Eli asked, his voice strained. "Competitive," Jonah said, and if an interest rate could smirk, his certainly did. He flipped to the next page. "Or, if the inn needs a significant amount of time to rebuild, we can transition the property to a mixed-use development while preserving the historical facade. It's a win-win situation." Nora didn't touch the papers. "And if we refuse? Then your options become limited." His smile was full of false empathy. "The world is already making decisions for you. Like the bank freezing Eli's accounts," Nora pointed out. "How did you know about that?" "I'm a good guesser," Jonah replied cheerfully. "Also I have sources." Vivian appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, looking like a stern judge. She'd applied lipstick, a shade she reserved for court appearances and funerals. "I worked as a nurse for 35 years, she said pleasantly. "Do you know what we called a patient who showed up with a bag of pills and a rehearsed story?" Jonah's smile didn't falter. "Enlighten me." "A seeker," Vivian said. "They weren't looking for care. They were looking for validation." "I want to help," Jonah said, but his tone sounded insincere. "You want our porch," Vivian stated. "You want to stand on it and claim that you saved us while secretly buying the property out from under our feet." Jonah's gaze shifted to Nora, seeking a more receptive audience. "Your mother is spirited," he said. "You're pragmatic. Think about your staff, your father's health. Pride can be expensive." Nora met his gaze and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, the relief of signing the agreement. The peace. A balanced ledger. Then she pictured the survey map with the ominous red hatching and the clause that could turn their misfortune into his opportunity. "We'll review your proposal," she said, her voice calm. Send it over digitally. We don't sign contracts with pens anymore. When he left, Jonah lingered on the porch like a man who already owned the place. This town will change regardless of what you do, he said, as if offering a blessing. The only question is whether it changes with you. We'll consult our attorneys, Nora said, and closed the door gently, a courtesy she didn't feel. After he'd gone, Eli paced back and forth as if he had a swarm of bees trapped inside him. We can't outsmart a man with resources like that, he said, his voice laced with desperation. I'm losing business. My clients are starting to call other agents. If I can't close some deals by Friday, I'll default on my line of credit, and then the bank will take action. We don't make deals with someone who brings a lighter to a fire, Vivian interrupted firmly. We can't prove he did, Eli snapped and then immediately flinched. I'm sorry. Nora squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. We need leverage, she said, addressing both of them. Mason is building a case against the insurance company for acting in bad faith. Sloan is investigating the arson. We'll craft a compelling narrative. Eli made a face. You mean PR? I mean we need to control the story, Nora clarified. If everyone is going to be talking about this, we need to make sure the truth gets out there. She texted Rhea. You want to make things right? Here's how. Off camera. No filters. Bring what you have on Morel's planning office and their heritage donors. She stared at the text bubbles, imagining Rhea in the carefully curated chaos of her studio, surrounded by her ring lights that looked like miniature moons. Rhea replied, Come alone. Tonight. Studio. No phones. I have receipts. Mason frowned when he saw the text. She parked behind the old car wash where Rhea rented her studio, a converted storage unit. It was the kind of space that made hard work look like art. The garage door was open, the neon sign buzzing. Inside, there was a plush velvet sofa and a plant that had somehow managed to survive despite the odds. Rhea stood in the center of the room, wearing a robe over leggings, her hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. You came, Rhea said, and her smile seemed genuine, not for show. I was afraid you wouldn't. I keep my promises, Nora said. Even after they've been broken. Rhea's expression softened. I'm sorry, she said, and the apology felt more sincere off camera. But there was still an underlying tension. I didn't know about the fire when I made that post. My brand team said that if I didn't get ahead of the story, I'd be ruined. I hate that I even know that sentence. The receipts? Nora asked, cutting to the chase. Rhea walked over to a credenza and pulled out a folder. Inside, emails from a Morel staffer using a private email account. A presentation for waterfront revitalization, with renderings that replace traditional clapboard buildings with modern glass structures. And a donor list with 3 names circled, Harborward LLC, Morel for Tomorrow Pike Family Office. A handwritten note was scrawled across the top. Hold until after Heritage Gala. How did you get these? Nora asked, impressed despite herself. Rhea laughed humorlessly. People assume I'm stupid because I wear makeup. Also, I dated a staffer for 6 weeks. He liked feeling important. Nora flipped through the pages. The presentation framed the inn as an underutilized footprint. Another slide stated, Obstacles. Legacy ownership reluctant/insurance claim delay likely. You posted my humiliation to buy time for this? Nora said, her voice barely concealing her disbelief. Rhea's throat tightened. I posted to survive the media storm, she said. But if I can sabotage them. She lifted her hands in a gesture of offering. Take it. Use it. Just don't mention my name. Why are you helping me? Nora asked, her tone less harsh now. Rhea picked at a loose thread on her robe. Because I remember you letting me sleep on your floor when I was 19. And because when I look in the mirror lately, I see a woman I wouldn't have wanted to be friends with. Nora slid the folder into her tote bag. Off camera, she said. No aruix. Off camera, Rhea agreed, then added quietly, if this destroys me, you'll live stream the aftermath, Nora finished. And for the first time that day, Rhea smiled genuinely. The reef off Elder Harbor didn't break the surface of the water, but everyone knew its location. A line of slightly darker water. A subtle, persistent ripple. The hazard that could tear open the hull of your boat if you weren't paying attention. By morning, Nora had gathered 3 strands of information. Mason's network traffic analysis, Sloane's arson investigation findings, and Ria's donor information. She also had a new email from Marion Mutual, requesting clarifying documentation within 72 hours, with a clear implication that failing to comply would be seen as an admission of guilt. She opened a spreadsheet and did what she had always done when faced with overwhelming problems. Named the contributing factors. DNS switch Mason. Arson Sloane. Easement, Vivian/microfilm. Permits Ria Data. Debt pressure Jonah. She drew arrows connecting them, not because it would solve anything but because it helped her visualize the connections. We need a counter-narrative, she told Mason over speakerphone. Something that forces them to change their strategy. You want to go public, he guessed. I want to be precise, Nora said. Not just a rant. A carefully constructed sequence of events. We need to leak documents to the one reporter who still answers her phone. Delaney Creed, Vivian said from the kitchen sink, where she was meticulously washing fruit as if it had betrayed her. Delaney owes me a favor, Eli admitted reluctantly. I gave her a quote once when everyone else refused to comment. Mason typed on his keyboard. She works at the Harbor Sentinel, he said. They keep publishing stories that Mr. Sunshine calls misunderstandings. They met Delaney at the Sentinel office, a converted bait shop with laminate floors and a determined spirit. She wore practical shoes that looked like armor and carried a notebook as if it were sacred text. Her pen moved with rhythmic precision. Off the record until we say otherwise, Delaney said. Did you bring me some good stuff? Nora placed the evidence on the table like surgical instruments. Screenshots with network headers, the domain registration details, the key clause from the microfilm printed in large font, and the permit presentation with its bland corporate font that somehow made the lies seem more palatable. This isn't a story yet, she said. It's 3 separate stories that need to converge. Delaney ran her finger over a domain name with a 0 instead of an O. Classic. Readers love a 0 and a hero. Don't worry, I won't use that line. She flipped to the clause. Easement rights with the first refusal clause. That's the hidden threat. She looked up at them. If I publish this, I'll get sued. If I publish it without you going on record, they'll accuse me of fabricating a conspiracy. If I publish it with you on record, they'll dismiss you as being vindictive. Whoever is behind this is counting on us needing irrefutable proof. They're counting on your exhaustion. We're not tired, Vivian said. We're wide awake. Delaney's pen paused. I can start with the DNS fraud, she said. That's safer. It's provable. Then I can hint at unrelated events that echo each other. The fire, the permit issues, the easement clause. I won't name the mayor without a second source. But I can name the shell companies. I can ask questions that force them to give damaging answers in public. Make them swim awkwardly, Nora said. Delaney smiled. Make them run aground on the reef. While Delaney worked on the article, Nora and Mason quietly took care of some critical tasks. They reinforced the inn's online security systems with a hardware token and a whitelist that was so restrictive that even legitimate traffic would require multiple authentications. Mason contacted 3 other businesses that had been targeted by similar domain name scams. A florist cried on the phone and then offered to provide discounted flowers for whenever you have something to celebrate. Nora carefully documented every email from the insurance company twice. Once digitally and once on paper, creating backups with methodical precision. At dusk, the Sentinel published a developing banner. Local businesses hit by sophisticated payment redirect. Insurer silent. The article was factual and well-written, with clear explanations for readers who weren't technically savvy and quotes from victims who were careful not to make overly dramatic statements. It didn't mention the mayor, but it didn't need to. The comments section quickly filled with names that Delaney hadn't included in the article. Lila Morell's office released a statement the next morning. We stand with our local businesses and will not tolerate cybercrime. The font was the same font that was used in the suspicious presentation. Jonah texted Eli. Care to reconsider? Timing matters. Eli didn't reply. Jonah followed up with a photo taken at a fancy location. A glass of amber-colored liquor and a skyline that was too modern for a small town like Elder Harbor. To surviving the storm. Sloan called at noon. The lab found traces of an accelerant, she said. Not gasoline. Something more specialized, a solvent used in marine maintenance. Guess what the planning office just ordered for dock maintenance? Solvent, Nora repeated. With a receipt. On a purchase card, Sloan confirmed. A shared one. The legal team will tell me 10 reasons why it's not solid evidence. It's both evidence and pressure, Nora said. We can use both. That evening, Nora stood on the cliffside path overlooking the harbor. The place where she used to go after long shifts to listen to the ocean. The water below was a powerful force. Constantly moving, constantly changing. The boats were huddled close to the pier. As if they were trying to hide from the unfolding drama. She called her father. Graham sounded weak. I'm at the inn, he said. I keep staring at the point where the fire stopped. It's like it just gave up. We're going to wear it down, Nora promised. We've set the stage. Now it's time to invite our guests. She hung up and texted Delaney a photo of the survey map with the red X marking the spot. Next chapter. Why an old clause still has the power to hurt. Delaney replied with a single word that felt like a promise. Tomorrow. Nora walked home, the salty air stiffening her hair, mentally making a list of everything that needed to be done, and counting to 8 whenever fear tried to creep in. The town would change no matter what they did, Jonah was right about that. But change could take many forms. And humiliation, she decided, could be a powerful tool. It could be the spark that ignited the change they wanted to see. At her kitchen table, beneath a lamp that cast a warm glow, she opened a new document and typed the headline for herself, not for the newspaper, the cuts and the current. Below it she wrote 3 names: Morrell, Pike, Hale. She drew a triangle connecting them, then added a 4th point outside the triangle, and drew a line connecting it to the others. Mason, she said into the speaker, not waiting to see if he was there. Find me the server room under Pier C. There was a moment of silence and then his voice, calm and unwavering. Meet me at the marina gates at dawn. She smiled into the quiet room, like someone who had suddenly remembered the location of a dangerous reef. Dawn it is. Ria's apology video had worked exactly as intended. It stopped the bleeding, but only for her. For Nora, the wound ran deeper. The folder that Ria had given her contained real, actionable information, but it was also incredibly dangerous. It included early drafts of redevelopment plans, spreadsheets listing donors, and internal memos that explicitly identified Hale Harbor Inn as an obstacle to progress, rather than a treasured landmark. Nora studied the documents at the kitchen table, while Mason sat across from her with 2 laptops open, cross-referencing the metadata. These were prepared long before the fire, he stated matter-of-factly. The file creation dates don't lie. They've been planning for us to fail all along, Nora murmured, her voice barely audible. Vivian flipped through the pages, her jaw clenched tightly. I warned you about Ria years ago, she said, her voice filled with frustration. Some people mistakenly believe that friendship and leverage are interchangeable. And yet, Ria hadn't completely abandoned them. Perhaps she felt a twinge of guilt. Or maybe she was simply hedging her bets, anticipating the need to protect herself from her own enemies. But Nora was certain of one thing. Ria Collins never made a move without carefully considering how it would reflect on her. Later that night, Ria texted Nora a single word of caution. Careful. You're not the only one with copies. Don't trust anyone. Even me. The message wasn't meant to offer comfort. It was a stark warning. Mason leaned closer to the laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. They left a breadcrumb for us, he announced. In the corrupted files from the gala's LED display, he had discovered a hidden watermark, a hexadecimal code embedded in the transitions between slides. When he decrypted it, it revealed the password. RIPPass_84 Harbor. Root password, Mason explained. But for what? Nora's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. It's not for the inn systems, we've secured those. Maybe the town servers? Vivian's voice was sharp and urgent. Or something much older. Something that was originally on paper, but has since been digitized. When Mason entered the code on the planning office's public portal, a hidden directory materialized, revealing a trove of scanned deeds, confidential easement agreements, and unauthorized permits. At the top of the list was a document labeled Transfer Draft, Hale Harbor Lot, pending incompetency ruling. Incompetency, Nora repeated, her throat suddenly dry. They were planning to declare Dad or me unfit to manage the property, and then seize control. Root access is like having godlike power, Mason explained. Someone with that level of control can write the narrative and completely erase your version of the story. For the first time, Nora fully grasped that the humiliation at the party hadn't simply been a display of cruelty. It was calculated groundwork, an attempt to portray her as unstable, impulsive, and ultimately unfit to manage the inn. A prelude to a legal attack. Sloane Reyes arrived at the house carrying a file box under her arm. She placed it on Nora's table and opened it with practiced efficiency. Inside, there were meticulously organized evidence photos, chain of custody reports, and detailed timelines. This is the official investigation, she stated. But unofficially? You're right to suspect a coordinated effort. She tapped one photograph, which showed containers of solvent that had been ordered by the planning office. Another showed Jonah Pike meeting with a logistics contractor just 3 days before the fire. He's paying for floors that don't even exist yet. It's shell companies stacked upon shell companies. Mason pulled up the incorporation records. Harbor Ward LLC has a parent company in Delaware, he reported. False fronts all the way down. Vivian poured tea, her hands steady as glass. And when you step onto a false floor, she said calmly, you inevitably fall through. Eli slammed his hand on the table in frustration. So what are we supposed to do? He demanded. Just wait for another fire? Another foreclosure notice? Nora looked at him, her expression both calm and determined. We expose the floor, she said. We make them afraid to take another step. The lighter had resurfaced like a haunting specter. Forensics had traced its purchase back to a high-end boutique in Boston. The buyer's name? A proxy connected to a trust fund controlled by a Morel donor. Sloane spread the receipts across the table. They'll try to dismiss it as a coincidence, she said. But it's enough to put the pressure on them. Simultaneously, Delaney Creed published her second article in the Sentinel. Heritage or handover? Who benefits from Elder Harbor's misfortune? It didn't make any direct accusations, but it asked a lot of pointed questions. And simply asking the questions was enough to stir up trouble in the town. At the local diner, people began to whisper more loudly. At the marina, the fishermen muttered about suits with torches. And at City Hall, Lila Morel smiled with increasing intensity, like paint that was beginning to crack under intense heat. When Nora saw her at a town council meeting, the mayor made direct eye contact with her and subtly raised her glass of water in what was clearly a mock toast. The message was crystal clear. You want to fight? Then prepare to fight someone who makes the rules. Jonah Pike returned, this time without a folder, but with a smile that seemed sharper and more certain than ever before. He found Eli alone at the marina, as if he knew exactly when Eli would be at his weakest. You can still save them, Jonah said, his voice low and persuasive. All it takes is a single signature, a single deal. Your sister won't do it. Your mother won't do it. But you, he leaned in closer to Eli. You understand the art of compromise. Eli's throat tightened. He thought of his clients facing foreclosure, his frozen accounts, the constant calls from his anxious staff late at night. He thought of his father coughing up ash. What do you want in return? Eli asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jonah's smile widened. Only what's already mine, he said. A piece of the inn. A piece of you. Eli didn't answer. But Jonah knew that silence was never a denial. That night, Eli sat alone in the darkness, his head buried in his hands. When Nora found him, she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Hesitation. Because in Elder Harbor, hesitation was just another word for betrayal. The morning after Jonah's visit, Graham collapsed in the hallway. One moment he was arguing with Eli about payroll, and the next, he clutched his chest and crumpled to the floor like a deflated sail. At the hospital, the machines beeped and whirred like a swarm of angry bees. Vivian sat vigil at his bedside, her hand clasped tightly around his. "He's stable for now," the doctor said. "But stress is a powerful factor. His heart has been bearing this burden for longer than any of you realize." Nora stood silently in the corner, watching the monitor display a jagged line representing her father's heartbeat. She thought of the endless columns of numbers in the ledgers, the fire consuming the INS beams, and the humiliating video endlessly looping on strangers' phones. She thought of Jonah's smug smile and Lila's dismissive toast. Eli looked utterly defeated. "If Dad doesn't recover," his voice trailed off, choked with emotion. "If he's unable to fight, what will happen to us?" Nora didn't answer because the answer was self-evident. They would declare Graham incompetent, trigger the easement clause, and seize control of the inn like a ripe fruit. The quiet tides lapped against the shore outside the hospital windows, patient and relentless. Elder Harbor continued to breathe while the Hale family was drowning. Back at the fire-ravaged ruins of the inn, Nora found herself unable to sit still. She paced restlessly around the office until her gaze fell once again on the safe. Its melted door, the charred remains of the map. Something still bothered her. A nagging feeling that she was missing something important. Donning gloves, she began to sift through the debris until her hand struck a second panel, hidden beneath the first safe. A false bottom, false floor. Inside, she discovered a rusted metal box, sealed tightly with tape. She carefully cut it open. Inside, there were reels of microfilm labeled Town Council Records 1982-85, and handwritten notes in her mother's familiar script. For when truth matters more than survival. Vivian, when summoned, remained silent for a long moment, her face ashen. "These are transcripts," she finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Minutes from meetings that were supposed to have been destroyed. Votes that were bought and sold. Permits that were altered." Mason quickly set up the microfilm reader. One frame displayed a council meeting in which Lila Morell's mother had aggressively lobbied for dock rights. The official minutes contained a record of a bribe, thinly disguised as a donation. "This," Mason declared, his voice filled with the weight of the discovery, "is dynamite." Vivian shook her head slowly. "No," she corrected him. "This is ammunition. Dynamite destroys indiscriminately. Ammunition is targeted." Nora realized that possessing the evidence wasn't enough. They needed leverage. And leverage meant creating a spectacle. She organized a decoy gala at the town hall, publicly claiming that it was a fundraiser for restoration. Rhea, ever the opportunist, promoted it as a comeback celebration. People came for various reasons: to witness the unfolding drama, to indulge in gossip, and to see whether the Hales were truly finished or whether they still had a fighting chance. Mason discreetly wired the venue with hidden cameras. Sloan stationed police officers near all the exits. Delaney Creed circulated through the crowd with her notebook, eager to uncover the latest developments. When Jonah arrived, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, the atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. When Mayor Morell entered, a glass of champagne in hand, the whispers escalated to a crescendo. Nora took the stage, the very same stage where she had once been publicly humiliated. But this time her voice didn't tremble. "Heritage," she declared, "isn't just a catchy slogan. It's a solemn responsibility. And responsibility demands transparency." The slideshow behind her began to change, replacing the embarrassing memes with scans of permits, shell company registrations, and excerpts from the suppressed council transcripts. Gasps of shock and outrage rippled through the room. Lila Morell's smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed. Jonah's jaw tightened visibly. It wasn't a decisive victory, but it was a bold opening move. The following morning, Marion Mutual called. Their tone had changed dramatically. In light of the new information that has come to light, the claims adjuster said cautiously, we are willing to reconsider our initial denial of your claim. Nora didn't allow herself to celebrate. She heard the catch in his voice, the unspoken condition, just before he said it. Provided that you agree to refrain from pursuing any litigation against the municipal government. We strongly prefer a cooperative resolution. Terms and conditions, Nora muttered, recognizing the familiar scent of a trap. They weren't truly trying to save the inn. They were attempting to buy their silence. Vivian's fury was controlled and precise. They're frightened, she said. That's a good sign. But fear can drive people to desperate measures. Mason pulled Nora aside. This is a stalling tactic, he warned. If you accept their offer, you might save the inn at least temporarily. But you'll also lose the opportunity to expose the corruption at its roots. Nora stared at the clauses in the email, the fine print that reeked of deceit. She thought of her father lying in a hospital bed. His life measured by the ticking of the monitors. She thought of the dedicated staff who depended on their paychecks. With a sigh, she closed the laptop. We don't sign. Eli broke first. That night, Nora found him talking with Jonah on the pier. Their voices hushed, their faces illuminated by the flickering flame of a cigarette lighter, the same type of lighter that had been found at the scene of the fire. You can't save them without my help, Jonah was saying. Your sister is too proud. Your mother is too embittered. But you understand that debt is simply a matter of numbers. Numbers that can be solved. Eli's hand trembled as he held the pen. Jonah made an offer. Don't, Nora said from the shadows. Eli froze, his face pale and guilty, looking younger than she'd ever seen him. Nora, you were going to sell us out, she stated quietly, each word cutting like a blade. Jonah's smile didn't waver. Families fall apart. Towns fall apart. The smart ones pick the right side when the split happens. Nora stepped forward, her voice as steady as steel. Then cut me in the open, not in the dark. Sloane appeared from behind stacks of lobster traps, her badge catching the light. She'd heard everything. Jonah's smile finally broke. And Eli? He dropped the pen as if it were burning him. The marina at dawn smelled of diesel fuel and secrets. Mason led Nora past locked gates to Pier C, where the planks were warped from the salt. He tapped his flashlight under the boards. There, he whispered. A glow appeared, an unnatural humming blue coming from servers hidden beneath tarps and crates. Wires snaked into the water, feeding off illegal connections. This is their brain, Mason explained. The servers that reroute the DNS siphon payments, maybe even hack the LED lights. Before Nora could respond, a shout broke through the fog. A figure charged at them, hooded and desperate. They shoved Mason, almost knocking him into the water. Nora lunged, grappling with the person until Sloane's voice barked, "Freeze!" The hood fell back, revealing not Jonah, not Layla, but a contractor, one of Jonah's logistics men. He tried to run anyway, but in the struggle his foot slipped and he went into the water with a loud crack. For one frozen second, Nora thought she would watch him disappear beneath the surface. But instinct was stronger than her anger, and she dove in. The cold water enveloped her as hands clawed, pulling and dragging him up. Together they broke the surface, gasping for air. Sloane hauled them out onto the dock. Mason yanked a hard drive from the server rack, dripping wet but intact. Evidence, he panted. And motive. Nora looked at the unconscious man, coughing up water. Even pawns bled. The hard drive contained everything. Mason and Nora stayed up for 2 nights straight, peeling back layers of encryption. Beneath shell companies and fake invoices, a clear trail emerged. Payments routed to Harbor Ward LLC, signatures that matched those from Jonah Pike's office, and timestamps that lined up with council maintenance orders. Then they found the jackpot. An email archive copied carelessly, with one subject line that made them both freeze. Re-incompetency proceedings, hail. It was addressed to Mayor Layla Morel, and attached was a drafted petition to declare Graham Hale legally unfit to manage his property. The fire, the DNS reroute, the humiliation, all of it had been preparation for this final move. Nora printed the email and spread it across the table with Vivian's old journals and the microfilm. The whole story was now clear. The humiliation of Nora to create doubt, the fire to cause the insurance to lapse, the fraudulent payments to block any claims, and the legal incompetency petition to seize the inn through the easement clause. Discovery, Vivian said, touching the papers. Not in court but in life. Eli sat silently, shame etched into his face. I almost signed with him, he whispered. Nora didn't respond. Forgiveness could wait, but the truth couldn't. The lawsuit hit like a clap of thunder. Vivian filed it herself with the lawyer Nora had begged her to trust, alleging fraud, conspiracy, and arson tied to Morel's network. The town buzzed with the news. Half of the people whispered that the Hales were desperate, clinging to what little they had left. The other half, fishermen, shopkeepers, and families who'd lost money to the same DNS trick, stood behind them. Jonah's counterattack was quick. He accused the Hales of negligence, of looking for scapegoats. Lila's office released a polished video called, We Stand with Elder Harbor, portraying the mayor as a savior, not a saboteur. But Delaney Creed's Sentinel article dropped the same morning, featuring screenshots from the servers, blurred but damning. The headline read, Force majeure or fraud? The Hale fire raises bigger questions. Morel called it slander, and Jonah dismissed it as noise. Yet the more they denied, the more the town looked at them with suspicion. Keep up the pressure, Sloan advised. Proof is the fire of its own. Feed it slowly, let it spread. Vivian's lips curved into something between a smile and a war cry. Then we set the table again. The council chamber was overflowing. Lights from news crews blinded everyone. Nora sat with her family in the front row, Mason beside her, and Sloan on the aisle. Delaney asked the first public question. Mayor Morel, why do your office's card statements show solvent purchases that match the arson lab report? Lila's smile was strained. Clerical error. Routine doc work. Nora stood up, holding up the printed email with incompetency proceedings. Hale in bold letters. Her voice was steady. Then explain this. The room erupted. Cameras zoomed in. Jonah whispered in Lila's ear and she stiffened. Vivian stood as well, holding her journals. She spoke with a nurse's clarity. I have kept 30 years of records. You can burn wood, but you cannot burn ink. Sloan stepped forward, placing the seized hard drive on the clerk's desk. Chain of custody intact, she announced. Warrants pending. For the first time, Lila's face showed cracks. The harbor lights outside flickered against the glass like applause. The investigation dragged on for months, but the tide had turned. Marion Mutual reinstated the insurance claim. The inn would be rebuilt, scarred but alive. Jonah disappeared from town. His office emptied overnight. Rumors placed him in the Caymans. Lila faced hearings, her smile now brittle and forced. At the rededication of Hale Harbor Inn, with new lights strung across the porch, neighbors gathered. Vivian read aloud from her journals, not with bitterness but with memory, stories of patients she'd saved, feuds she'd endured, and tides she'd weathered. Nora stood by her father, who was frail but present, his hand resting on hers. Eli, humbled, worked quietly beside them, trying to earn back their trust one task at a time. When the string quartet played the first note, Nora remembered the laughter at that first party, sharp, cruel, meant to break her. She remembered Ria's betrayal, Jonah's smirk, and Lila's toast. And she realized that humiliation had been fuel. It had burned, yes, but it had lit a path. She raised her glass to the crowd. To Elder Harbor, she said. To memory, to rebuilding, and to laughter that belongs to us. The porch shook with applause. The lights glowed like stars returning. After the laughter came the fire. And after the fire came the fight. And after the fight came the harbor lights.